Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly today Mr. Stephen Langdon, who is the MP for Essex-Windsor. Mr. Langdon is seated in your gallery. He's here in his role as Trade and Industry Critic for the Federal New Democrats, and I'd ask that all members, when Mr. Langdon stands, give him the cordial welcome to the Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this privilege to thank the members of this Assembly and the people of this province for the opportunity, along with myself and the Honourable Dave Russell and the Honourable Ray Speaker, for serving this legislature for 20-plus years. Mr. Speaker, it's been a privilege, and I thank the members of this Assembly for that opportunity. It's an opportunity that not that many people in this province are afforded. Mr. Speaker, I would like to introduce three people who have made that opportunity available to me. They are in your gallery, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Lou Peterson, my constituency researcher, Mr. Art Stelter, who was responsible for my nomination, and my wonderful wife, who permitted me to run as a candidate. I'd like them to rise and receive the recognition of the Assembly.
Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports. Introduction of special guests.
Member for Stettler.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me a great deal of pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly 26 grade 6 students from Gus Wetter School in the town of Castor. They are accompanied by their teachers, Mrs. Dunkel and Mrs. Goring, and by parents, Mr. Warman, Mrs. James, Mrs. Jackson, Mrs. Dunlop, Mrs. Gustafson, Mr. Holloway, and the driver, Mr. Turnbull. Mr. Speaker, it gives me particular pleasure to introduce this group of students because Gus Wetter School is my alma mater, and I have two children presently attending there. I would ask that they rise in the members' gallery and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of my colleague, the Honourable Ken Rostad, MLA for Camrose, who is attending Ministers' Conference, Ministers responsible for justice in New Brunswick today, and therefore asked me to introduce on his behalf 87 students from grade 8 in the school of Charlie Killam, who are accompanied by 4 teachers, Mrs. Donna Rimchi, Mr. Errol Moan, Mr. Bruce Manning, and Mr. Art Fadum. They are seated in the public and members gallery, and I would ask all members to give them a warm welcome.
Minister of Culture, and then Red Deer South.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased today to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly 3 former members of the Executive of the Cultural Heritage Council of Alberta, all who held very important positions in that body. They're seated in the members' gallery, and they are Mr. Don Vinci, Mr. Nick Spilios, and Mr. Abu Laban. And I'd ask them to stand and receive the welcome of the Assembly and our thanks for their contribution to Alberta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to introduce to you and through you to the members of the legislature 3 distinguished citizens from the constituency of Red Deer South who are up visiting the legislature this afternoon. Their names are Mrs. Eileen Schultz, Miss Natalie Mara, and Miss Jean McClune. I would ask that they rise and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Environment. Mr. Speaker, recently the Attorney General told the House that he was unwilling to lay charges in respect of a release of toxic gas in the city of Calgary on March the 29th because the Minister of Environment had failed to supply sufficient information for a successful prosecution. We begin to see why now, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Minister, will the Minister possibly explain how his department failed to contact 2 eyewitnesses, and until today, we're told they finally got around it to today, after it hit the front page of the Calgary Herald?
Mr. Speaker, I'm unaware that the Attorney General has made a recommendation or a decision with respect to this matter.
A supplementary question to the Minister. If he wants to play cute, people want to know how come his department is so shoddy. And my question is that these 2 eyewitnesses, one apparently even contacted the Environment Department and couldn't find anyone who was interested in taking the information. No wonder the Attorney General has some problems, Mr. Speaker. My question is, how does the Minister now expect charges to be laid in the face of such a shoddy and sloppy investigation?
Mr. Speaker, what the Honourable Leader of the Opposition has just said is incorrect. To suggest that there wasn't anyone in Alberta Environment who lacked any interest in taking the information down that was conveyed by a particular individual. I have in front of me, and I think it'd be most appropriate for me to perhaps file with the Legislative Assembly. I have only 1 copy, but I'd be very happy to make appropriate copies. A copy, in fact, of the evidence that was supplied on the 30th day of March 1987 that was filed with Alberta Environment.
Mr. Speaker, that's not the question. There was 2 key witnesses, one who was on national television, and his department did not even contact them, even after he contacted the department. My question is, why was that not done?
Mr. Speaker, since the 29th day of March 1987, when I indicated at that time very publicly that any individual in the City of Calgary who would have any information with respect to a cloud release, should they wish to make available that information to Alberta Environment, that we would have officials in the offices that we have in Calgary available. In addition to that, I also pointed out and indicated the presence of every telephone book in the province of Alberta, of a pollution emergency response number and Alberta Safety Services response number. What we received, Mr. Speaker, some 300 calls from individuals in the area. All of them were filed and tabulated. And in the subsequent weeks since that time, Alberta Environment has been providing information to individuals within the Attorney General's Department, and they are assessing that information. As recently as Monday of this week, a meeting was held between officials in Alberta Environment and officials in the Attorney General's Department, and at this point in time, no decision has been made. That is by way of a recommendation to the Attorney General to determine one way or the other whether charges will be or will not be laid. The point remains, Mr. Speaker, that part of the information that has been provided to the Attorney General's Department is knowledge of a list of some 300 individuals who had provided information to Alberta Environment. It's also my understanding that the 2 individuals in question that the Leader of the Opposition is referring to today had also provided information to the Calgary City Police. That information has also been made known to individuals in the Attorney General's Department.
Mr. Speaker, I can't believe the answer that I'm getting from this minister. The minister talks tough, blustery all the time about how he's going to go after the polluters and what a good job they're going to do investigating. And 2 key people who even attempted to get a hold of the Department of Environment were not even interviewed, and the minister's making excuses. Mr. Speaker, in view of this investigation, and in view of the way it's been handled, would the minister himself seriously consider resigning over this matter?
Mr. Speaker, the very emphatic answer to the question posed by the Leader of the Opposition is no. I have undertaken since the 29th day of March a determined effort to ensure that a case is being built that would provide individuals within the Attorney General's Department a position whereby charges, or at least a recommendation can be made to the Attorney General that charges can be laid. I understand that there is something in jurisprudence called prosecutorial independence. On the one hand, the Minister of the Environment and those officials associated with him in the department have clearly received the input from the two individuals that the Leader of the Opposition is talking about. I have a sheet of paper in front of me, and perhaps we could ask the page. It was from that particular time to have it copies made and circulated, which clearly indicates that information was provided. I repeat it again. That is part of the evidence base that has been assembled, and part of the evidence base has been transferred to the Attorney General's Department, is acknowledgement of knowledge of phone calls that have been provided to us. I followed up yesterday afternoon, Mr. Speaker, when a call came to my office, as I understand, during the question period when I was in here, and I was notified of it in conclusion of the question period, directing individuals to go from Alberta Environment to talk to these two individuals in Calgary. One was talked to this morning, and the report given to me around the noon hour was that no new evidence has been provided to us. And I understand that in the last hour and a half to 2 hours, the second individual had been talked to, and once again the conclusion is that no new evidence has been provided to us. It's also my understanding, Mr. Speaker, that when officials from Alberta Environment arrived at the place of work, one of the individuals who called yesterday, the individual said that he could not talk to the investigators from Alberta Environment in his office, and that they would have to go down to the lobby of a particular building in the city of Calgary. So the interview took place in the lobby, and midway through the interview...
Thank you, Honourable Member. Clover Bar, supplementary. Followed by Clark Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister of the Environment, and the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, I don't think he'd resign. He likes that job. Doesn't mean maybe should or shouldn't. The question to the Honourable Minister, in light of the fact that he's now had a fair amount of experience in his department and head of that department, is the Minister in a position to indicate at this time if he thinks that there is a genuine need for an environmental ombudsman who can take calls without worrying if it's going to be acted upon, if they have an environmental concern, to direct them to that environmental ombudsman?
Well, I think, Mr. Speaker, the point is that I'm now being a bit redundant with this. The fact of the matter is the call was acted on. It's not a question of the call not having been acted on. It's, I guess, a question of the perception in the mind of the Leader of the Opposition that basically someone, I guess, should have received a written letter back saying thank you very much for your input, and perhaps that's something that I would be happy to consider. In terms of the question of an environmental ombudsman, that's been a matter that I've given some thought to in the last year, and it's a matter that I intend on giving some further thought to into the future. I'm not satisfied at the moment that we need in the province of Alberta an environmental ombudsman. I think that what we need is a significantly more aggressive approach taken by the department that I'm the Minister of.
Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, the question to the Minister. It shouldn't be hard to track down a cloud of brown toxic gas wandering across South Calgary. There can't be that many people or machines admitting that occasionally. Now, would the Minister go this far, if he will not admit that his department's investigation has been sloppy and shoddy, that he will agree to resign in 2 weeks if he can't lay charges?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I cannot accept at the moment that the investigation has been shoddy or anything else. I would like to point out once again the subject matter prosecutorial independence, and it's my understanding in the rules of this business that in essence that it's my duty and my responsibility, a duty and a responsibility that I've upheld with every degree of energy in my body, to in fact present the information that we've been able to gather to an independent group of individuals who are all trained in law, who will then assess to see whether or not there is a package of information that would encourage lawyers to go forward with charges. That decision is made quite independently of the amount of material that's being provided by Alberta Environment. I think, Mr. Speaker, that what Alberta needs is a tough Minister of the Environment. I think I am a tough Minister of the Environment, and Mr. Speaker, I'm going to repeat that again. I think what Alberta needs is a tough Minister of the Environment, and I think I am a tough Minister of the Environment. One thing...
No, Honourable Member. We're having a ballot. We're having a ballot here by thumping desk. Vance Cochrane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Environment, while the opposition members are concerned about punishment, can the Minister advise what steps his officials or company officials working together with his officials have taken to review the operating practices and equipment of this situation to ensure public safety and employee safety is maintained?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the review is a constant one. It always exists and it always will exist. Be that as it may, I believe, and I'll repeat what I said in this Assembly not too many days ago, I really believe that in this case the culprit has to be identified and charges have to be laid.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question to the member for Edmonton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care has chosen not to apologize to members of the medical profession whom he insulted last Friday. Again, I quote from the member's own words from Hansard. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, he says that the particular fee code, that is contraceptive counseling, was being badly abused by some in the medical profession who were using it to pad their incomes, end of quote. The Minister has since declined the invitation I made to him yesterday, Mr. Speaker, in the Assembly to put any real substance behind these very serious allegations. Does the Minister, Mr. Speaker, intend to continue to hide behind his legislative immunity, or will he now put forward the evidence upon which these very serious allegations are based?
Mr. Speaker, I dealt with this matter yesterday, both in the House and outside of the House, and basically explained that the problem with respect to the fee schedule for medical doctors is that there are some, I believe, 2,000 different individual fee schedules, and it was our view that a particular fee schedule that involved contraceptive counseling was a procedure or a service provided by medical practitioners that could well be done under and should be done under a number of other fee schedules. And I outlined in a letter to the president of the Alberta Medical Association yesterday the fact that we would expect those services to be provided during the course of the annual general examination, during the course of pregnancies, and during the course of a couple of other fee schedules that I outlined. I also indicated that while perhaps abuse of the system may not be the best choice of words, I don't know what else to call it, when practitioners, and there are few in number who do this, maximize their incomes by using every possible opportunity there is to bill for higher levels of fees than might otherwise be the case. Under the circumstances where there is deliberate and fraudulent billing of the health care insurance plan, we notify, as we properly should, the College of Physicians and Surgeons, who then take action. And, Mr. Speaker, they have, during the course of the past year, reprimanded a number of physicians for that purpose. In cases where there is simply abuse of the system that we have designed, we take the action that I took last Tuesday by announcing that this particular fee schedule will no longer apply after August 1st, and that practitioners would be expected to bill under other fee schedules.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister claimed that he had such evidence last week. Does he fail to appreciate that as a Minister of the Crown, he must exercise a lot of care in making such statements, and that these kinds of unsubstantiated claims are why many doctors, women, and others no longer trust the Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I am concerned about having been quoted as making sweeping accusations about the entire medical profession, and I have not done that. I've said that there are some, unfortunately some, however few they are, make it bad for everyone. There's a very small percentage of doctors who abuse or misuse the system. There's a smaller percentage yet who in fact bill in a fraudulent way. Our job is to try to be good stewards of the public funds that are in the health care insurance plan, some $900 million. I take that job seriously, and I think I have to bring to public attention from time to time, and the attention of the Alberta Medical Association, areas where I think improvements can be made in the use of the funding that is provided.
But, Mr. Speaker, there seem to be enough doctors to force the Minister to drop the fee schedule from the list. Now, in the case of women who need to see a doctor for contraceptive counseling and services, but who are not pregnant nor need an annual medical checkup, will the doctors now be forced to abuse your new system by having to bill for one service while they're actually rendering another one?
No, that would be indeed an abuse of the system if they were, in the case of an annual medical checkup, each individual is allowed one per year that can be billed to the health care insurance plan. And what I indicated to Dr. Kennedy in my letter of yesterday was that we would expect, when it's asked for by the patient or when the doctor deems it to be appropriate, that counseling, contraceptive counseling, sex education matters would be provided during the course of an annual checkup, also during the course of pregnancies, also during the course of a general visit that may involve other matters that's billed under what's called A1 or A2 on the fee schedule. So we would expect the doctors provide that sort of information there. In addition to that, if an individual is on birth control pills and requires a follow-up checkup by the doctor, that could be billed under the A4 schedule, which is significantly less in cost to the health care insurance plan than is the contraceptive counseling schedule. So there are indeed a good many opportunities for doctors to provide this kind of service. I also indicated yesterday that I thought that we needed to beef up other areas of providing this kind of counseling that are much more effective.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since the minister has such an inside track where all the abuses are in the system, has he investigated any possible abuse of the surgical rates on women in this province, particularly with reference to the reported high rates of cesarean section and hysterectomies?
Mr. Speaker, I remain concerned, as do staff in the health care insurance plan and in my department, about that matter. I'm not yet at liberty to suggest that there's any action that can or should be taken. It is more than likely a matter that should be dealt with by the College of Physicians and Surgeons, because we're dealing with a particular medical practice in this case, not the method of billing the health care insurance plan. And I don't regard it as my responsibility or an area that I should be directly involved in when it comes to deciding whether a cesarean birth should be carried out or whether a natural birth should occur. That is something that the College of Physicians and Surgeons and the Alberta Medical Association are going to have to deal with, and the honourable member should be aware that there are a number of people in both of those organizations that are concerned about this area and actively discussing it.
Main question, Westlake Sturgeon. All righty, we have here now Edmonton Goldbar, followed by Calgary McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a supplementary. I'm glad to hear the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care talk about beefing up other family planning services. Yesterday, my question, Mr. Speaker, is to the Minister of Community and Occupational Health. Yesterday, the Minister stressed the independence of the health units, and that's one thing. But government responsibility surely is another. Will the Minister now be willing to make it a requirement, since clearly his colleague thinks this is important, make it a requirement that family planning and counseling be offered by all of the health units in the province?
Mr. Speaker, I received last week a very excellent report prepared on pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases in Alberta teens. And in that report was a list of recommendations and suggestions on actions that we should take. And I have discussed that with my colleague, the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care. We'll be doing so again in the days ahead. Have asked the 27 medical officers of health, as well as staff in the Department of Community and Occupational Health, to come back to me by July 1 with an action plan, which we would hope to put in place after that time.
McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Hospital and Medical Care, a supplementary. Considering the fact it is possible that there could be deliberate abuse of the medical care system, would the Minister considering having doctors charged with fraud under the Criminal Code of Canada where evidence shows such deliberate fraud exists?
Mr. Speaker, the system thus far has been one of the, when there is fraudulent billing brought to our attention by the operators of the health care insurance plan, is to turn the matter over to the College of Physicians and Surgeons. They have handed out some pretty severe penalties over the years, and the question of whether or not the matter should then be referred to our Attorney General is one that I presently have under consideration. I would hasten to add that it may be my responsibility as Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care and the minister responsible for the health care insurance plan to make that reference, but it would then be the Attorney General's responsibility to determine whether or not there's any foundation for a charge under the criminal code or whether or not that's a proper route to take. So that question would have to be answered by the Attorney General.
Wes Lockster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question today is to the Minister of Forestry, Lands and Wildlife. This spring, dead whitefish have been taken from the shores of Monogamy Lake, northern Alberta, by the truckload. The fish have died, Mr. Speaker, from lack of oxygen given to the overabundance of fish because the Minister's department has forbidden commercial fishing to the extent necessary to keep the population down. Now, Mr. Speaker, because the first question is because for commercial fishing is being overlooked as a viable economic entity or activity in this province, particularly by some of our native population, what is the minister's excuse for allowing such a indiscriminate waste of our natural resource to take place as what happened this spring in Lake Monogamy?
Mr. Speaker, your preamble of the member's question isn't the same as the information my staff. There was, talking about truckloads, there was a report given to me that there was a portion of or a small fish kill this spring due to lack of oxygen in certain places. As far as the amount of fish that were taken, the original licenses were issued to fish on January the 12th. In that, when that fishery was open, there was some 202,000 pounds of fish taken. It was again then opened in February 26th, and they, with 62,000 pounds taken, they addressed the issue and were checking the lake. They again opened the lake on March the 12th, and 462,000 pounds were taken, for a total of 726,000 pounds from that lake. Had they not taken those last two fisheries and reopened the lake twice, that oxygen level could have caused a worse problem, and they mitigated the problems as well as they could have. We hope that we did not overfish the lake.
Speaker, that's a ridiculous answer. The fish were killed by lack of oxygen. Obviously, the permit wasn't large enough. Obviously, there's incompetence. Because the whitefish is really the only predator, Mr. Speaker, in the province is commercial fishermen. What is their new management policies, if any, does the minister have to make sure that this does not repeat not only in this lake but many other northern lakes?
I'm glad to have an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to address that. April 1 of this year, the whole new system has been installed for commercial fishing licenses, and we're underway with management plans for individual lakes. With the new licensing system, we will be able to work with the commercial fishermen to improve the whole quality of their marketing and the opening and closing of lakes to match the marketing of their products so that all Albertans can have fresh fish in this province. In the past, it's been unfortunate that all of the fish caught had to be legally shipped to Winnipeg through the Fresh Fish Marketing Board and then returned to Alberta. We have negotiated over the last 2 years with the Fresh Fish Marketing Board, and we now have some 15 processors in the province who are processing fish here and selling it into a legal marketplace in Alberta. Unfortunately, under the previous Liberal government in Ottawa, they forced us continuously to sell all of our fish to Winnipeg, sir.
Mr. Speaker, he's got to be the greatest stand-up comedian since Wayne and Schuster. Remember, the Liberals making Albertans sell fish to Winnipeggers. Now, that's a good one. Mr. Speaker, to the minister, I'm sorry, I'm trying to contain my laughter, Mr. Speaker, but to the minister, could he tell us, in view of the shortages of market, that even Winnipeggers are not buying enough fish, what he is doing to try to develop markets, in point of view of the fact that we have these free trade talks going? What is he doing to try to develop markets for our local fishermen in the United States?
Under a federal provincial agreement, Mr. Speaker, for many years, all marketing of fish is done by the Fresh Fish Marketing Board out of Winnipeg. All fishermen in the freshwater area throughout the Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta have been compelled, as I mentioned earlier, to ship their fish to that Fresh Fish Marketing Board. As recently as the last several weeks, we've had more applicants for processing fish right here. The best thing that we can do to help the market of our local fishermen is to increase the awareness and increase the availability of fresh fish in the marketplace in Alberta. Not all stores carry fresh whitefish, and with these 15 new processors, gradually that will take place. We are working very hard with agriculture also on that awareness of using Alberta products, and fresh fish from our lakes here is definitely one of them. We also would like to make the member aware that whitefish is a sport fish too. In many lakes in the province, ice fishing for whitefish is caught with hook and is as a sport, and it's not all done by commercial fishermen. It's a recreational sport too.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker. The Wheat Board does not prevent the Minister of Agriculture looking for markets for wheat. The Fish Board does not stop this minister from looking for markets for fish. But in view of the announced policy, new fishing policies, which I understand are going to be lake by lake, the way the minister announced it now, when can the commercial fishermen of this province expect a definite announcement? Or are we going to have to sit around and wait for the incompetent decisions like the Minister of Environment's putting it forward before we will find out what your decisions and what your policy will be?
Mr. Speaker, announcements were made, and meetings with fishermen throughout the last 3 years have created that policy. April 1, they all started buying their new licenses, and they're quite aware. All of our offices throughout the province have been dealing directly, one-on-one with every commercial fisherman, and they're aware of the new policies, the new licensing, and they for several years have discussed and finally approved the policy on a lake-by-lake basis. It will take us about 2 years to finalize, we hope, the management plans of all the major lakes. We are obtaining input from fish and game clubs throughout the province, recreational fishermen, and commercial fishermen on a lake-by-lake basis to come up with that long-term management plan that looks at a 5-year cycle of what should be happening on each lake for both sports fishing and for commercial fishery. A lot of progress has been made, and we hope that now that the new licensing system has been approved by Ottawa and the new regs are in, we can actively get on with the job of doing it. Mr. Speaker, my Assistant Deputy Minister is the Chief Fisheries Officer in the province of Alberta. He's appointed to that position by the Minister of Fisheries in Ottawa, and we administer the regulations on behalf of Ottawa, and as it is federal legislation. It did take us a long time to get those rules and regulations changed, and they're in progress, and I thank my federal colleagues for moving them through as rapidly as they did.
Clover Bar.
Speaker, to the Minister, supplementary question. Is there any monitoring of oxygen level that goes on in some of the large lakes that do have commercial fishing, or is there any monitoring of oxygen levels at all during the winter season?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, there is. If there's any, we can't assure you that each and every lake is. All the key areas where we know there is a problem, our staff are directed to monitor those levels.
Athabasca Lac-La-Biche, supplementary. Edmonton Glengarry, followed by Stony Plain.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I would like to know what steps the Minister has taken to ensure that actual sales of white fish do not exceed the total quotas set by his department.
Mr. Speaker, that's an irresponsible question because you can't sell more than what you catch.
Stony Plain.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To correct any false impression, that is, the more you fish a lake, that you can prevent oxygen starvation, would the Minister please confirm that oxygen starvation is more a function of snow cover and decaying plant growth than it is fishing levels?
Yes, thank you for asking me the question. You're very definitely right. It has to be monitored on a continuous basis, and the biologists do, where they feel there is a problem, monitor. The number of lakes we have in this province would be almost impossible to do them all, but the major lakes that are producing our fish, both for sport fishing and commercial fishing, are monitored.
Question period will now go upstream to the member for Little Bow, followed by Calgary Fish Creek.
Very good, Mr.
Honorary membership in the Liberal Party, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Agriculture. Some 47,000 CN and CP workers could possibly be on strike as early as mid-June. And I'd like to ask the Minister, with regards to that possible rail strike, whether, as the Minister or the Associate Minister, there is a plan in place by which we can continually monitor and as well urge policy decisions on the federal government while that strike is either discussions are in place or not in place.
Plans are being developed, yes.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, because of the seriousness of the situation, maybe I could share with the honourable member for Little Bow that we are monitoring it from our own office. It has been relayed to us that that Doug Stanley, the federal appointed conciliatory commissioner, is going to meet with the unions on the 9th of June, and after that time he is going to be making a report to the federal Minister of Labour. Hopefully at that time both sides will see the wisdom of his recommendations to the Minister of Labour, but at this time we are optimistic that hopefully it can be avoided. We are monitoring it very closely, as I indicated some days ago, to the extent that we also did communicate our deep concern for the Minister to take preventive action by way of a telex, and we followed it up with an additional letter outlining the importance of making sure that our railways continue to run.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister, could the Minister indicate whether in the communique that the suggestion was made that railway workers could be declared as essential service personnel as one of the solutions to this problem?
Mr. Speaker, that suggestion was not made, and part of the reason why it was not made was we didn't feel that at this time we should tie the hands of the federal government or the federal minister. We felt we should leave him the flexibility to deal with as best he could to resolve the situation, recognizing the serious urgency of it.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary. Would the Minister be prepared in the strategy from Alberta to recommend, if necessary, that the crop year be extended in the event of the strike in terms of a long week, so that the current prices of grain, which are low in themselves, could be extended, it could be used in that long year commitment?
Mr. Speaker, I would be open to making that suggestion, as we did last year. As the honourable member is aware, we did make that recommendation to the federal minister, and the recommendation was accepted to the extent that they did not disallow any late shipments to take into account the better prices of last year. We are open to making that suggestion in the event that the elevators do become congested again.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question, and this is with regards to the grain stock in Alberta. Has the Minister indicated the grain stock in Alberta to the Federal Minister in the seriousness of the situation and the effect it could have on our farmers?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we did, and I should share with the honourable member that we did so by way of a letter as a follow-up to the telex, whereby we outlined the possibility of actual cash flow reductions to the farming population in the event that the railways did go on strike.
Vegreville, followed by Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister, a conversation with an elevator agent in the village of Lavoy indicated to me that there's a shortage of rail cars in that shipping district currently, and they're concerned, especially with this possible work stoppage looming in the future. I'm wondering, has the Minister received any other representations in that regard?
To date, no, Mr. Speaker, but in the event that the honourable member would like, we're more than happy to make representations for a reallocation of cars to specific elevators, or if he wishes, he can do so himself, but we're more than happy to do it for him if he wishes us to.
Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, and back to the same minister, back to the original question of possible labor strike causing stoppages in transportation. In view of the minister's government here and also the government in Ottawa's commitment to letting free market forces and free negotiation take place and the possibility of a strike therefore going ahead, would the minister consider establishing a fund from what advance payments or loans could be made to the farmers in the case of a strike to tide them over the cash shortage period so later on that we recovered later on when the strike is settled and the markets are sold or the grain is sold?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure there's merit to the honourable member's suggestion, but it would be more appropriately put to the federal level as it does fall under their jurisdiction.
Thank you. Member for Calgary Fish Creek, followed by Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's a publication entitled A Book About Birth Control produced by the Montreal Health Centre that's reportedly being used by the Sexuality Division of the Calgary Health Services in its education programming. I'd like to ask the Minister of Community and Occupational Health, in view of the explicit language and explicit illustrations within the publication, could the Minister clarify for the Assembly today this government's policy regarding the scope or scale of distribution of such a publication?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have the assurance of the Calgary Board of Health that this is a document that is not distributed on a mass basis. It is a book of information for professionals so that they can provide family planning services, sexuality education, or sexuality counseling. It is not for mass distribution. It is for use by professionals only.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, I would like to draw to the Minister's attention that on the inside cover of the book, it says that this publication is sold to organization and is meant for mass distribution. In view of that reference to mass distribution, I wonder if I could ask the Minister to, would he be prepared to confirm with Calgary Health Services that, in fact, distribution of this publication will be limited to health professionals and educators?
Mr. Speaker, I'm very aware of the concerns of the honourable member. He's brought them to my attention before. Other concerns, similar concerns, have been expressed in the city of Calgary. I have talked to the Calgary Board of Health, Mr. Speaker, as early as this morning, and have had their assurance that this booklet is for the use of professionals and is not provided for the general public.
Edmonton Centre.
To the Minister of Community Health, will he assure the Assembly that this book in question will be made available at all other health units throughout the province, so the professionals and those who access those professionals may have the best possible information, however graphic, that is available?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said so many times in the Assembly, that we provide funding to local health units to put on programs that they consider a priority. We encourage them to do that. I'm very glad, I'm very grateful that the Calgary Board of Health has seen fit, as other health units have, to put on important programs such as sexuality education and family planning. They receive those resources from our department. They then also receive reproductive health material from our department. They also then choose to go out and seek out material that's useful to them for the best delivery of their program.
Additional supplementaries on this? Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, my questions concern the recent government fee increases in miscellaneous departments for miscellaneous services consequent on budget cuts. My question is to the Treasurer or whichever other minister can answer the particular point, which is that these fees are to be financed by via MasterCard and Visa instead of running accounts, as was the case before. Will the provincial treasurer or the minister involved on behalf of the government state and justify the arrangements made with MasterCard and Visa?
One here.
Mr. Speaker, the question wasn't precise, but I do know of one instance in which it has been occurring, and that is in corporate registry, which falls within the Consumer and Corporate Affairs portfolio. But I'm sorry, I didn't hear any precise question being asked.
Justify.
In brief form. Mr. Speaker, those fees are introduced for telephone searches, and they are being continued for counter searches of companies in corporate registry. It was part of the budget exercise, as you may recall, and members may recall in the budget speech, there was reference to fees being increased across government.
Mr. Speaker, that's so, but my question really was as to the arrangements with MasterCard and Visa that the government makes to finance the method of payment of the fees instead of running the accounts, as used to be the case. Why was this so?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in the instance at corporate registry, it was thought that it would be a convenience for the clients who are using the search services. There have been some clients who have indicated that it is not convenient for them. The department is implementing now a charge account system for those clients so that they can continue their searches in a way that is most convenient to the entrepreneurial spirit that prevails in Alberta.
Thank you. In the minister's own department, she has mentioned company searches by telephone. These have increased in cost from nothing to $5 for a single search. Now, that's just reading information off the computer, Mr. Speaker. And can the minister justify such a very large increase and the basis on which a $5 fee is fixed?
Most certainly, Mr. Speaker. The information is on computers. In some instances, it's also on microfiche. We have a phone bank of operators who are taking calls every minute of the day. We have those employees who are skilled, and of course their salaries are also included in the cost. We have, of course, the cost of the building, the cost of the electricity, the cost of the entire support staff in corporate registry, which has some 150,000 corporate names on registry. I think the costs, when all in, probably more than exceed the cost of each individual search.
To the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care, then, one such fee increase in his department is from nothing to $30 for supplying a reprint of the services rendered in the previous year in the cases where particular citizens have lost theirs or never received them but need them. That, again, is just reproduced from the computer, Mr. Speaker, and I wonder how such an enormous charge for that service can be justified.
Speaker, I'd be pleased to check into that matter and report.
Member for Calgary, Forest Lawn. Edmonton, Meadowlark, supplementary.
To the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs, could the Minister, speaking of fee increases, could the Minister please justify for the House the increase in mutual fund salesmen's licensing fees from $50 to $300 one time all of a sudden, which is certainly an onerous burden on a wide variety of self-employed individuals in our economy today?
Mr. Speaker, mutual fund salesmen, of course, generally work on a commission, and the upside of their salary is very high, and $300 a year for their annual practicing license or fee certainly pales beside that which a practicing member of the bar would have to pay, as one analogy. The other point I might make is that the licensing, as it's called, licensing fee for the salesman has not been increased. I believe my information to be correct when I say for 30 years, and it seemed as if we might move into the contemporary world by bringing the costs and the fees into line.
Member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, for the sake of an ideological agreement, deregulation has put Alberta consumers and the economic future of the province of Alberta at risk. The Minister of Energy has finally addressed loss of our traditional jurisdiction over prices in other provinces, but he's clearly waited too long as producers have suffered reduced netbacks, the province has suffered reduced revenues, and Alberta consumers have seen no benefit. So the Minister of Energy, where was the Minister last October when producers told him that the Western gas marketing deal for Ontario would cost them $215 million a year? Was he asleep?
The time for question period has expired. Is there unanimous consent for this line of questions to be completed? Opposed? Carried. Minister of Energy.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would urge my colleague not to get too excited. It's hard on his blood pressure to get so excited like that. But, Mr. Speaker, last year we were with the industry, the oil and gas industry in this province, addressing the very important issue of natural gas deregulation. And the honourable member should remember that the process of going into deregulation, the decision was a joint decision between the producers in this province, the governments of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia, and the federal government. And the objective of deregulation was to allow producers and consumers to enter into long-term contracts and short-term contracts where appropriate. And one of the reasons, the main reasons the producers were in agreement with that was so they could have access to that United States market. So, Mr. Speaker, at the time deregulation decision was made, it was the agreement of all parties. Now, since that time, there has been the significant fall in world prices of oil, as the honourable member knows. And a number of things have happened that have thrown barriers in the process of deregulation. And we are addressing those problems on an ongoing basis. And you can be assured, Mr. Speaker, that we will not agree to proceed with deregulation until all those barriers are removed. And so we're taking steps appropriately, one at a time, to make sure that the interests of the producers and consumers in this province are taken care of.
Mr. Speaker, Ontario is still our best customer. Can the minister confirm that in the same discount deal for Ontario residential users negotiated last fall, the provincial royalty share fell by 24%, while our producer netbacks fell by 50%?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member again fails to recall that we had a significant drop in the world price of oil. And the natural gas prices fell accordingly where natural gas was in competition with fuel oil. And, Mr. Speaker, we would not have been able to compete in that market if we had not been able to have our natural gas prices reflect what the competitive prices were of fuel oil and other sources of energy. The deal between Western Gas Marketing and the utilities in Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba showed a discount reflecting the surplus of supply that we have, as well as the fact that there had been the fall in world oil prices. That discount was some 20 cents, if I recall, into the Ontario and Quebec markets. And that particular deal is now looked upon as a good deal for our producers in this province.
Mr. Speaker, will the minister confirm that he failed in his attempts to sell the industry on a reference price for gas royalty calculation, and that the more drastic method of permit refusals are his last available means of raising this year's resource revenues above their lowest level since 1975?
No, they're not, Mr. Speaker.
Well, final supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Given that denying export permits and par pricing are the only ideas to come out of the minister's office, what is the status of the par pricing idea? Has the minister succumbed to an industry veto of an interim par price for gas or not?
Mr. Speaker, we are reviewing our whole royalty structure in the natural gas area, and we have had consultations with the industry with respect to a par value for natural gas. That concept will be considered in the overall royalty review, and so we will not be taking any immediate steps to introduce any par value at this time more than in the next couple of months. But I have trouble, Mr. Speaker, with the insinuations and the comments by the honourable member from Forest Lawn. I could have to come to the conclusion that in view of the policy of that party, if we carried that out, we would not have markets for our natural gas, and our producers in this province would be in dire straits.
Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, to supplementary to the minister, when you have a free market on the consumer end, one of the ways of controlling pricing or getting fair pricing is supply management, as any farmer will tell you. Is the minister considering any studies to manage the supply of natural gas to our customers in such a way that we can push the price up?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member should know, the reason for our going to natural gas deregulation was to allow market forces to take place so that we could take care of the supply that we have. The demand that is out there in the United States hasn't resulted in our producers in this province having access to that market to the degree that we wanted. For some time now, there have been predictions that that market would open up soon. We are still forecasting that that market will open up relatively soon, and at that stage, the supply situation in this province will be such that we will be able to deal with the demand in the United States, which will be to the benefit of our consumers, to the benefit of our producers.
Time for question period has expired. The chair has received notification. Points of order from Edmonton Glengarry, followed by Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would rise under Beauchesne citation 320.2. After my question, the Minister of Forestry, Lands and Wildlife referred to my question as irresponsible, and irresponsible is cited as being unparliamentary, and in this case I would say it was also inaccurate. To call that question irresponsible would be like calling someone irresponsible for asking for radar traps, because we all know it's illegal to speed. I know it's illegal for people to sell more fish. I'm questioning whether or not he's checking on...
Order, please, honourable member. The point of order is to make the point, not to go on and carry on discussion that took place in question period. And the point of order is made, and the blues will have to be checked unless the minister indeed agrees that such a phrase was used and is prepared to withdraw it, because the chair does not remember hearing it at that time, but if so, so be it. Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I will withdraw the comment if it bothers the individual and apologize for the use of that phrase. It's true.
No, it should have been nonsensical.
It may have been, another term may have been used.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister. Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. During the question period this afternoon, during a question addressed by the member from Westlock Sturgeon to the Minister of Forestry, Public Lands and Wildlife, the member from Westlock Sturgeon used certain words, Mr. Speaker, that I believe violate the following sections of Beauchesne number 357. And is it in order, Mr. Speaker, to quote by way of this, page 129 in Beauchesne? Section 357 of Beauchesne reads, and I quote, "The traditional restrictions and questions are those listed in Beauchesne's 4th edition at citation 171, which is as follows. 171, in putting a question, a member must confine himself to the narrowest limits. In making a question, observations which might lead to debate cannot be regarded as coming within the proper limits of a question. The purpose of a question is to obtain information and not to supply it to the House. A question, oral or written, must not A, be ironical, rhetorical, offensive, or contain epithet, innuendo, satire, or ridicule. F, contain an expression of opinion. G, be hypothetical. H, contain inferences. I, contain imputations. Q, contain or imply charges of a personal character. T, impugn the accuracy of information conveyed to the House by a minister." Further to that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to draw to your attention and the attention of honourable members Beauchesne section 359, which states, A brief question seeking information about an important matter of some urgency which follows within the administrative responsibility of the government is in order, but it must be a question, not an expression of an opinion, representation, argumentation, nor debate. And 7, a question must adhere to the proprieties of the House in terms of inferences, imputing motives, or casting aspersions upon persons within the House or out of it. Mr. Speaker, I sincerely believe that as a result of those questions that I've been quoted from Beauchesne 357 and 359, that certain words used by the member from West Loch Sturgeon certainly are in violation of these two sections of Beauchesne, and as a result, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that the member from West Loch Sturgeon withdraw those words that fall under these categories and were directed to the Minister of the Environment in today's question period.
West Loch Sturgeon to the point of order, or...
Speaker, I described the Honourable Minister of the Environment with so many adjectives it's hard for me to recall. I do not think I infringed on Beauchesne or against the rules of this House, but what I will do, Mr. Speaker, if it's all right with you and the House, examine the blues, and if indeed I have transgressed against propriety in any way, I will withdraw it. Right now, my feelings are, as all I did was say that he was incompetent, or the minister is incompetent, and I don't think that that's justifiable.
That's a fact.
That's a fact and can't be questioned.
The chair looks forward with keen anticipation to see what the results of this discussion on this purported point of order will be tomorrow. However, the chair also carefully followed the various citations as made by the Minister of the Environment. And the chair once again would direct all interested members of the House to read through Beauchesne 359 and 360 as they relate to question period. And there are those experts within the House and some pseudo-experts outside of the House who have all sorts of interesting opinions with respect to questions that are indeed in order. And it might be worthy reading for some of the observers of this House to go and read Beauchesne 359, because indeed a number of the questions, if 359, for example, let alone 357, was strictly adhered to, there would be absolutely no questions asked in question period on some days. As mentioned, the chair looks forward to the member for West Loch Sturgeon reading through the blues and taking appropriate action if necessary tomorrow.